Hello and welcome back to the Double Swing. It's been a couple weeks and we had, I think, potentially our worst event ever in terms of actual performance with IEM Dallas. Now, personally, I managed to secure a single point, but overall, I can't exactly brag because that's the only point I secured. It's the only point anyone secured. All of YouM3's picks missed. The viewers, you two, also screwed the pooch. It was an absolute calamity.
I think the worst part as well is that at the end of our show, we were like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about G2. Oh yeah, they've got Stewie. Yeah, I mean that's nothing's gonna happen. Nothing could happen. How could it? How could it happen?" And then Dallas did. So
Yeah.
fun event though. It was a fun event.
It certainly was. I mean, as a viewer, it was interesting to just follow along, see this sort of thing unfold, and then at the end of it go, holy crap. Like, reflect back on what happened, look back at my picks and go, everything I thought was going to happen basically didn't. The only thing I got right was that Vitality would be good, but even then, I picked them to win the event. I picked Spirit to go deep. They face each other, sure. It's kind of I kind of got screwed, but at the same time, it kind of worked out. But man, yeah, what a weird event. Who saw this coming?
Yeah. I think the worst part for us, and we talked about this before we went in for this broadcast, but the idea that we made our video the same night that a massive patch came out for
Yeah.
CS, and that ESL decided to jump straight in with that new patch is unbelievable. One, because it could have colored our opinions. I don't think it would have changed too much, maybe, but there would have been more doubt cast on certain teams. But Dallas is just, I mean, this was an anomaly event. Bear in mind, the teams that were in ESL Pro League that made it deep were still running on the old map pool for the longest time, so they weren't able to practice Dust 2. They were playing officials still with Overpass in it. And some of them went off to Betboom Dasha, and the caliber of Dust 2 wasn't great, but some teams did get to rehearse it a bit. And then we go into a Dallas where like half the teams, their Dust 2 isn't, they don't feel confident in it, or it's not up to snuff. And then we have Vertigo, where even if you were confident on it before, like the map has changed drastically in the way that it's going to be played. Nobody touched Vertigo. This is a very rare instance where we had an event with like effectively like a 4.5 map or a 5.5 map pool where Dust 2 was played here and there, and Vertigo got picked once the entire tournament.
Yeah.
Like, say what you want about bad map pools. Nobody has ever got into a tournament and only picked a map once. I don't think that's happened.
It's crazy. It's a mass anomaly. And you know what the weirdest part is? I thought most teams would be, like, kind of, not scared, but they'd be cautious around Dust 2. It actually was the third most played map. Teams were willing to just lay down the goal and say, hey, we've not had much time to prep, you've not had much time to prep. It's Dust 2. How different can it be? Our aimers are better than your aimers. Let's give Deathmatch a shot. That's basically what I think happened in a lot of cases. But in terms of the G2 side of things, that wasn't even really what mattered for them. I mean, how many times did they even play Dust 2? So I remember them playing Inferno, I remember them playing Nuke, I remember playing these sorts of maps, and controversially, actually, winning the grand final on Inferno, on Nuke, despite Anubis, one of the maps they've actually been better on historically, well, recently, being the map they actually ended up losing. I thought G2 would thrive in the chaos if they made it here. Taking that Dust 2 to people, relying on m0NESY and Nico. Instead, it was a number of things that they usually do just working better.
Yeah.
With Stewie, which was the crazy part for a lot of people.
Yeah, and G2 did play it, 4 times, I think? Played it against Vitality, played it against Liquid, FaZe, and 9Z. And they picked Dust 2 against FaZe. I think they picked it against Vitality as well. And that's like the underdog angle, basically, where Vitality were one of those teams that hell Apex even said online, like, we haven't had time to prepare for Vertigo, so Vertigo's already out of the pool. Even though G2 I think banned it in that series.
No, Vitality banned Dust 2, but sorry, you mean Vertigo?
Yeah. I
Sorry, I
don't
got
think
distracted.
I don't think Vitality would have picked Vertigo anyway, but G2 still strayed away from it.
Mm.
And yeah, what we had, I think it was something that I heard on Talking Counter, is that Yanko basically pointed out the fact that like nobody picked Mirage against a G2 that have like basically never played Mirage since Nexa joined the roster. Like they moved that into their permaban and they've been playing Vertigo instead. And well, like nobody wanted to play Vertigo. G2 didn't want to play Vertigo, obviously. Nico's hates the map and he was calling, so he's definitely not going to choose that map.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we just had some Dust 2s and they were okay. They're just kind of boring. Like the same thing happened like every Dust 2 ever in history, but you did have quite a lot of like just brawly rounds from time to
It
time,
got
and
ugly, yeah.
yeah, even in that the G2 9Z game where I still remember that one clip of like Modesty flanking, like trying to sell a fake on long with an AWP. I think they came in with like an AWP and pistols.
Yes.
And he wins a 1v1 by like flanking at 8 seconds with bomb away from him trying to go to B. It's mad. You know, these rounds were not
Yeah.
comfortable. Very hectic. Yeah, this Dallas event was all over the place, but it did deliver on pure entertainment value. Like so many games were hanging by threads. There were like crazy clutches, like even just like super important duels that would swing or potentially win games. This event had so much going for it on like the display of mechanics level. And then we also have the storyline of Stewie coming in, G Stew, somehow serving as a talisman and a way for the crowd to just rally behind the craziness that G2 were undergoing. This was a perfect storm for G2 in a lot of ways because no other team was going to be particularly strong, and they still have Nico, one of the best riflers ever to play Counter-Strike, and Monacy, the best player in the world. It's these are
Yeah.
these are these are really, really important stars in the Counter-Strike space, and if you're allowed to just go in with minimal prep and kind of free flow and free will things to a certain degree, then yeah, G2 could have your number, and they did at this event.
Yeah, the interesting thing about G2 is historically, as long as that roster has existed with Nico and Hunter, pretty much for the last 3 and a bit years, they have had a couple month-long stretches where they've played at a championship level. Despite constantly coming under fire, despite constantly being one of the first teams we say should be doing better, they've had the highest round win rate for those 3 years. When they've had their peaks, they've won events. And this event was a classic example of if you have Nico and you get Hunter on a stage, you have a chance. The fact that they now have Monacy, who's just playing at that insane level, means that, yeah, they should be taken seriously as a threat to win every event, no matter who the caller is. I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to put it that way. For a team who've had a terrible IGL and players who've been mechanically underwhelming, I mean, Nexa, it's atrocious, that roster move. That's the worst roster move they've made in years, by the way. If you look at the numbers, that's one of the first roster moves they made that like killed them for like 6 months straight. Even with that move, they're a danger to win events. Yeah. That's the crazy part. So I just want to throw that out there just because we're going to go into them and probably have to bring them up again because they're going to be at these spring finals. It'll come up. They should be taken seriously, despite the ridiculousness of it all, despite the poor calling. They're an elite team as long as they have Nico and Monacy at the top end.
It's just I'm gonna steal another Yanko line. I thought it was more G2 have won 3v5 through the tournament. Like Stewie was, and Richard Lewis pointed this out on Twitter, statistically worse than Hooksy. Now I think he played his role better than Hooksy, but statistically worse than Hooksy. And Nexa was having an awful event. Like he admits it himself, an absolutely terrible event. So I thought they won 3v5, but I think Yanko said, "How did they win two with 2.5 players? Basically, how did they win this event? Because Hunter only really showed up sometimes."
He was on and off in the playoffs, but in the playoffs, his average rating went from like 0.9 something to 1.1.
Yes,
like he actually showed up in the playoffs, which he does all the time. He's just a bot in the studio, and then as soon as the big stage comes out, especially if they're getting the crowd, Hunter feeds off it like no one you've ever seen, and it's frustrating because if he was like that in groups, we'd never have these conversations about, will they even make it out? Like they'd just be the best team in the world in terms of just consistency if Hunter didn't need the crowd to cheer him on first.
Yeah.
But that's part of the problem with these guys.
Yeah, I think Dallas was purely an entertainment. You know, we'll look at this as like a snapshot of like this is what Counter-Strike could be if we didn't care about like who the best team in the world was going to be or who was, you know, all these other narratives about like the overarching year. If we just take Dallas in isolation, it was a fantastic event. Like the storyline was great, the games were fun, like I
Crowd
enjoyed
was
myself.
involved.
Yeah. I enjoyed myself watching and torturing myself watching that and the Mason Nomadic Masters in the same sitting. And
I struggled with that.
yeah, and hurting my sleep schedule. Dallas was a highlight this year, I think already so far. Even if I would not use it as any serious metric for best team in the world.
No, there was some other silly stuff like Mao saying that they'd taken a extended break, essentially in terms of playing and prepping before this event. And I looked at their schedule. I brought this up on Retake the Week. Lads, this is your last event before you take like a month off. Why would you not wait you had another week to push through, basically, and you decide to take the break now? Like, come on. You guys aren't playing Blast Premier Spring Finals. Then there's the summer break, and I'm pretty sure, like, pretty much, you're gone. You had to last another week. It wasn't the best idea in my eyes. And FaZe finally, I think, reached the breaking point. Apparently they haven't been super, I think, reflective of their weaknesses. The way they described it, it seems like they've been very much living off the vibes, living off the hype, and living off the fact that they have so much working for them that they didn't truly address their issues. They finally got a bit of a wake-up call. I think that's also going to come up in our analysis. But speaking about our analysis, it's probably time we do some of our picks for these finals, which are going to be held in London. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be in attendance, so I'm very excited for this event.
I'm undecided about whether I'm going or not. Jesus. So and that probably means I'm probably not going. But you know, maybe I'll just like last minute just decide. Okay, let's actually rock on down, see if I can snag some tickets. Who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy weekend that actually for the actual finals, because I believe I have. Well, those NBA fans out there will know there's the NBA finals going on. Game 4 is on that Friday night. That's that Saturday morning at 1:30 a.m. So I'm pretty sure I'm doing. I might be in the arena for the quarterfinal or semifinal, clubbing until with some friends until that game starts, and I'm going to leave the club, go to a sports bar.
Oh my god.
Watch that game and potentially meet back up with everyone afterwards.
Sounds like a fun but long night.
It's going to be cracked. And then I'm going to grab what sleep I can and go back on Saturday for more Counter-Strike. It's going to be an awesome weekend, but it's going to be an absolute mess. But on that note, let's start with the first pick, which went to myself. I hope I've got these in the right order. So we're meant to be picking from Group A first. I haven't got them in the right order. That's fine. It's fine. I've taken, for my Group A pick, the one, the only, FaZe Clan. It's obviously not a great time to be picking them, given, they finally fell off their form. They're no longer sitting on top of the world. They're no longer making every final. But at least I believe that they can bounce back. This is a good event for them to come back after a wake-up call. They had a decent run at Pro League in terms of making at least top 8 after they had their problems in the groups. But yeah, at Dallas, losing to Spirit, getting, quite frankly, embarrassed in my eyes by G2. A G2 playing still Hooksy system and the same calls, but without their main caller, with 2 players barely holding onto the mouse, it does kind of slap you in the face. And they said they had a very long discussion afterwards. I'm believing in them to have sorted some things out, come back into this event, willing and wanting to prove themselves. So I think they'll actually show us in closer to their sort of like Chengdu level, where they are actually still almost untouchable on the big stage. A lock in to get out of the groups, and ruthless when it matters most. That's the FaZe I expect to come back here.
Yeah, FaZe were a weird one this tournament because it's so rare to see this team basically not have at least one player serving as like a barometer of consistency or someone that can sort of elevate the rest of the squad. It felt like everybody was like serving in parity for kills or openers. You'd sometimes get a Frozen opener, you'd sometimes get a nice ROPS opener, or Rain would sometimes crack into sites or something. but I never felt like we were getting, a clean multi-kill and just complete domination from FaZe at any point in any of these games. So it was a weird event. Like it was an anomaly as far as FaZe is concerned. Like the standards that they hold to themselves. Like Rops went from being the best player in the world at the end of last year to coming into this year and just hasn't been the same. Hasn't even been as aggressive. I think that was one of the notes that I had coming out of last year is that he was playing more aggressive Counter-Strike. But we were also focused on, is Donk a wide swing abuser on CS2? Maybe Rops was probably the wide swing abuser the most because Donk has remained consistent in some of his output, but Rops is just not going for those same sort of aggressive fights anymore.
Yeah, I do have a bit of a thought on that because actually he's reduced the amount of fights he takes, but you still hear it in comms when he wants to go for it, he's going to call for it. So I think it's been more of a conscious choice to vary it up because it was getting like you saw him every overpass game almost. He'd take that one duel out of Monster like 2-3 times. I think it did probably get a little readable for their liking as a team because he is quite involved and quite mentally involved in that side of the game. So I think it was a conscious effort just to dial it back, go back to being the more passive Rops, who's more about allowing the rest of the team to develop the game plan, develop the space taking, and it's promoted Frozen to be their star rifler essentially for the 2024, and that's worked. But again, here they've kind of fallen off. Maybe he takes another step forward.
Yeah, I just think if you're having that level of output, as much as you may think it's like readable to a certain degree, it's still such a lethal weapon if that is the level that you're able to put up with. Like if you're talking about being the best player in the world at one point or another and just saying like, actually guys, I'm gonna take a step back. You guys got it. I'm gonna go back to the lurking thing that I was doing. We'll still win. We got so many stars. Like I'd rather see Rops take leadership in a position like that. Like he is the veteran more so over Frozen, even though Frozen like will rate quite highly. Like Rops does have quite some parity in the way that they like to play, or at least they did when Frozen joined the team. And like, sure, Frozen can be a more aggressive rifler, but you were doing that before Frozen arrived. So even when Frozen arrived, you were still doing
Frozen
that.
was already there when he was doing that. Yeah.
So I just kind of wish I saw more output from Rops in particular, because I've seen what he could do for this team. Like, he might be a great lurker, sure, but there were even moments kind of prior, at the start of I guess at the end of 2022, where it's just like his lurks were too late, or it just felt like he was never activating on a timing. So
sure.
Yeah, FaZe are an interesting one. I do think they will put up a better performance here. Like, what is it? Their opening round is against Seoul?
It is Seoul, yeah.
Yeah, it's against Seoul. And, I mean, just on a firepower's metric, FaZe will win. I think the advantage that Seoul will have is that they'll just have, like, hard rehearsed all the maps. And even if they are kind of a team that does rely on Vertigo to a certain degree as like an upset map, I think, in my eyes. But it won't see play in the series, so there's just no way FaZe wouldn't ban it. I just don't think Seoul is strong enough, and that's kind of a first round win for FaZe in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean the question is after that, once you win your opening game, you're playing what? For first or second rather than third or fourth. At which point, who cares if they get upset by an on-form Astralis with 5 fraggers, It's not that big a deal to them, I think, because they are at that point, as I said, they're the big stage players, ice cold killers. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. I don't have too many qualms about that one. So I have just noticed we haven't kept our picks to the groups, and that's, I think, fine, considering the groups don't really line up with the way we split favorites and underdogs. Because Group A is, well, there's only one other team picked in Group A, and we've picked the entirety of Group B. So let's just
I'll just go to
whichever one you want. Yeah,
I'll just keep in Group A just because it's there. It's not a favorite. I've gone with an underdog instead, and this to me feels like a total steal. I've gone with Astralis. Since kicking Blame F and Device in-game leading, I think we've said it before, but very pleasantly surprised with how good the team has looked. You're getting better output out of players like Stown, and Yabi as well. Like both of these guys come in as stars, and they basically didn't look like that when they joined Astralis at first. And some of the events that they had, especially kind of leading into the Copenhagen major, it was honestly kind of shambolic. Like
Yeah.
watching these guys go from star positions to suddenly like the only one that's in the positive was Blame F, and so they were like, oh well, he's the in-game leader and he's top of the charts. He's not doing enough to facilitate us. Let's get him out, and it's worked. You know, they've made semifinals in the last 3 events that they've attended, and they just look they look more cohesive. Like they all believe in each other more. Like I noticed previously with the Blame F squad is that when Blame F and Device were on this team, it almost felt like they were just hard baiting everybody on the team except each other. And
Mm.
I almost felt like that still carried over a little bit when Stan and Yabi joined. And I'm glad that now it's like, we're setting people up a bit better. You're allowing for later timings and rounds if someone feels like they could slip through a crack in the defense. This Astralis feels like there's a little bit more ownership on individual players, but they're able to link that into proper team play. So I like what I'm seeing out of Astralis so far. I think their opening round matchup is harder than FaZe's in this group, but I would say that they, in my eyes, are the favorites over a Na'Vi that have been kind of capitulating since their results at Copenhagen.
Yeah, they are definitely okay compared to Na'Vi. Yes, I thought, as I've said it before, I'll say it again. Na'Vi's major win was a fluke, and even if I have to stretch my definition of fluke or change what I mean when I say fluke, they got lucky that JL played like someone other than JL for one event. Like that's lucky. That's a fluke.
He played like the best player in the world.
He did for one event, and you're like, cool, do it again. And obviously he hasn't. But I look at this roster, and it does give me. It's not the greatest 1-to-1 comparison, but when it works, it's supposed to basically be like the Astralis of old. There is a little more, like there is a system, there is a structure, there's a way of approaching things, but individuals in the game have to run the system. And everyone has their contributing voice, and everyone has their responsibilities, and can make plays to a certain extent. I don't think that's quite true of players like Bro. Basically just Bro, but still, it's the vibe I'm getting. And the problem with that is if you don't have a great coach, great IGL, who can make the right call in the tough situations, you end up with everyone kind of underperforming. And because once these young players start getting, out-aimed, they make the wrong read, they get shut down, and you need someone to bail them out of the mud, no one seems capable of it. That's why in the big stage games so far, they've struggled. They've lost, sure, they've been in close games, but they've lost the close games, and that's the issue. Like, they're in overtime away from beating Vitality at Pro League.
Mm-hmm.
But they lost the overtime. That's what matters. They lost the close game, and they didn't have, I think, that extra gear, that extra solution outside of the individuals. That I don't think that's just a question of devices calling at that point, and what him and the coach can come up with. At any given moment, though, they can become the best team in the world. I think that's the problem we have right now. It's well and good to say that they have these issues, these shortcomings, but if they start winning the close games, that firepower is almost unmatched, and they become terrifying. So I agree, they're a steal for an underdog right now, and I also have them upsetting Na'Vi in their first game. So this will be a fascinating series to open up with.
Yeah, I think it's curious though, because when Buzz was still on Astralis, it almost felt like he was getting hard done by because he wasn't like set up in the right ways to be an entry. And now Stare, with all the roll moves, is basically serving as the entry fragger for Astralis. And I don't know, it feels a little backwards. Like if you could rewind like a few months before the Stown Yabi move and you knew you were going to get rid of Blame F, they probably would still have kept Buzz, and then Stare could play support roles and things, and it could have maybe panned out for the young prospect. But
yeah,
I mean, I think they, from my understanding, Device seems to give a lot of credit to Stare in like the way that he has been adaptable and facilitated the Stown and Yabi move in kind of the best way possible. Like he's just accepting every new responsibility that he has to take. So I think that's props to him.
With the addition of Yabi, he has to give up some of his lurking, like sort of spots he would have liked. and with the addition of Stown, he has to give up some of the trader spots he might have enjoyed. So I guess it is ultimately on him to make those two fit. And yeah, he's not exactly getting the luxurious rifling rolls, but he's making it work. His stats are fine, and I think it's just a testament to his quality. I think mostly in the post plant and the CT side of things. Not so much his T play, but when he gets his opportunities in those few spots that he does, he is capitalizing. He is a talented young player, so kudos to him, because his numbers are still good. Despite all that, despite what we say, they're acceptable rifle numbers. So yeah, very impressed with some of these individuals. Still not sold on them in the playoffs. That being said, any given moment they could be the most dangerous team in the world.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that they can make it work at some point or another. It's the best Astralis ever looked for a little bit. So
for a long time.
Just happy that we can ride a bit of a wave.
Yeah, and that on the topic of round win percentage, things like that, they are in the zone currently to win an event. They've trended up. They've reached that sort of title winning zone. About 57% for those who don't know. 57% is roughly where you can start realistically winning events. You can start predicting that a team will win an event. Most teams don't win events the way Na'Vi did, where they won the major with a sub 50% round win percentage. It just doesn't happen anywhere else. It's usually around 57%, so watch out for that. It's coming soon. Moving on to another favorite. I've picked from Group B. The only pick that netted anyone any points in Dallas.
Yeah, you.
Yes, me. 1 point. They didn't even win the event. And that was Vitality. The French-ish. I still hold on to the French idea of the team, just because the headlines are always about the French players, realistically. It's Apex and his trash talk and his calling, and then it's Zywoo and can he perform on the stage, and is he actually the GOAT of anything? All of which doesn't matter, because they've just been consistently winning or making finals, making top fours at events, and that's what matters when I'm picking a favourite. I want to see that sort of level. Now, I did see an alarming statistical comparison of Spinks in the groups versus the playoffs. He might be the anti-Hunter. He cannot keep his consistency from the groups to the playoffs. He's a beast in the groups.
Yeah.
And a shitter in the playoffs is currently what I'm understanding.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I'll say. I remember when we were doing a preview for Dallas, I remember saying that, that was my concern, is how do Flames and Spinks hold up in terms of their output? Because they do go
Flames
missing.
Is fine.
Yeah,
Flames is fine.
Spinks
is the issue.
I know. But Flames does power up in certain in certain moments. He does actually have a higher level of output at times. But I think it's just weird to see Flames be so passive and be punished for being so passive so many times when it came to watching Vitality in these playoffs. I think Flames' CT side is really where he's struggling at the moment. I think the idea that he needs to do things on the map, otherwise it will just be very readable, very easy to target, and you just get free territory very, very often. It doesn't always even feel like how Flames wants to play, but it's the way that he is being told to play. And the good news for Vitality is that Mezzy showed up when it came to the final moments, when other players
he's actually good in the playoffs as well. Sorry to interrupt there, but Mezzy also goes up in the playoffs. Sure, he's not playing the most impactful spots and he's not got the best roles. So often we're talking he goes from a 0.99 to a 1.03, but it's statistically significant. And in this specific set of playoffs, he was insane.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think he did an interview after one of his games. I can't remember which one, but he basically said, I think he might have been on the desk, but it was along the lines of he just needed to change his focus and change his mindset from playing like an anchor, where all he was prioritizing ever was how long he could stay alive, or do I play a new rat position or something along those lines. And I think he said he was trying to take more fights and just focus on killing as many people as he could before dying.
Right.
It's just a small shift up in the way that he's going to approach when he knows a hit is coming his way, or is he going to make a play. He was a lot more free flowing with Vitality when it came to some of those moments, and he was willing to take fights. He didn't get a kill and then tuck away and wait for rotates. He kept fighting, and he had a great clip of him acing on Anubis, which was probably the cleanest thing you've seen from Mezzy since joining Vitality.
That was beautiful, yeah.
So it's it's weird to think that the realization that that Mezzy had is something that Flames almost has to come to, or the squad has to come to, that to allow Flames to do stuff like that. And it just doesn't seem like that's there currently. So I do think Vitality are a very strong pick. You know, I don't think we're gonna have to worry about Zai going missing in the finals.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like the type of event where I have to think about that, even, weirdly enough.
Yeah, I mean, they might end up being. It might be the most Vitality thing ever. They'll stomp their way through, make the grand final, lose 2-1. Zaiwu gets a second place MVP. Like, the most Vitality event possible. But I think they've got a good chance of winning this one as well. So I'm happy picking them.
Also, if Stewie can win as like the sole American in the playoffs, then Messi can maybe win as the sole Brit in the playoffs.
Yeah, and he'll have the crowd cheering him on.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see how drunk the crowd gets, because that pretty much determines how into it the British crowd are. But
I know, but the drunker they are, the louder they will yell. So.
But this event's at Wembley. I'm not sure. I might be stone cold sober. I'm going to be honest. The price of a pint in that establishment, not worth it. Not worth it. We'll see. The CS crowd usually has more money than sense when it comes to these events.
Yeah, we'll also see how belligerent or articulate any of the crowd are.
We love to see it. Right, moving on to your picks. Finally, we're on to your favorites.
Yeah,
because you've got both your favorites in this group.
And I'll go for the one that actually does still feel like a favorite. I've gone with Spirit. Now, they did massively disappoint, and yes, they do have... This team has a choking problem. I say that knowing full well that they have lost series to big names, like to big teams. They have not lost to noobs. They've lost to teams with higher name value and a lot more experience than they do. But I think the idea of Spirit being a favorite gets to them. Like, they know that they are the ones that are destined to win. They are a team with high caliber players. They are highly ranked. When they were the young underdogs coming in from behind, they were just playing their own Counter-Strike and understanding that they could just out-mechanics, they can out-fight people, but people also have clocked onto the way that Spirit like to play, like fighting ahead of smokes. They like to challenge for things consistently, and Spirit looked a shell of themselves on a lot of the maps that we were able to catch of Dallas, albeit how few they were. They weren't as assertive in the way that they were taking map control on CT sides. They weren't going for their, I guess, trademarked plays through smokes, and they suffered in late round situations very frequently, especially on CT. You know, they sometimes didn't even get into positions to combat, and I felt like they were saving more than I've ever really seen Spirit do. That does go part and parcel with losing more rounds, but
yes,
you know, it just felt odd to watch Spirit in this way. And Zontix, same kind of issues, I think, kind of rearing their head. So a lot of situations where he's walking in winnable clutches and wasting too much time. That was very akin to the Copenhagen Major. And Shiro just also didn't have a great event. But Donk didn't either. You know, like, this is... Everything kind of falls apart when Donk doesn't create that room. Everybody else feels like they have to do things, and nobody really stepped up to that plate.
No, this was a... I'm gonna just say this. Shiro, actually, I thought played fine this event. Statistically, he's above his averages in the games I watched. He did what he could. The problem was on the front end, the donk of it all. He had by his standards, abysmal showing. Sure, abysmal. It's a luxury if your abysmal performance is a 1.16 rating, 0.7 something frags per round. Like, you know, elite rifle play by most people's standards. But it wasn't what Spirit needed. It wasn't enough. I mean, it's all well and good having the guys who are usually more passive end up with a nice rating because they got to not die sometimes, and they actually picked up some frags in, like, closing moments of dead rounds. But Donk himself didn't have a good event, and his impact, or lack thereof, was felt massively by this team. They just couldn't get in rhythm, play their game. They needed him to show up and be present, and he really wasn't. Like, he was fine on a numbers basis, but considering the number of fights he takes and the number of key fights he takes, more specifically, it just wasn't good enough. it wasn't impactful enough, and they fell apart. I think if you look at the series they lose, you just say like, yeah, they lose to the elite teams, but they rarely get the most out of their players in these series. These are big time like disappearances. So yeah, despite making top 4 at Dallas, you can say that was a disappointing event for Spirit. But coming into this one, they're still going to be dangerous, because if that's your bottom end when your Rifle's had his worst event of the year, and you finish top 4, it's nothing to cry about, really. It's nothing to cry about, and they're definitely still a dangerous team to go deep, if not all the way in Blast. I mean, especially now that they've cooled off a bit and people maybe jumping off the hype bandwagon, maybe that does take some of the pressure off their backs and they can get back to winning Counter-Strike. And maybe eventually, through enough of this annoying cycle of, oh, we're underdogs, punch up, win, we're favorites, choke, they'll eventually work their way through it and just be a good team again. Eventually.
Yeah, I think it's just the prospect of being considered the best team in the world. Like if Donk is putting up that kind of performance, and you have a reliable back end alongside this behemoth of a front end, then you are the team that is going to be the best team in the world. So I think that
true,
that prospect is just daunting, or it's like weighing on their minds. I think
sure, but eventually it'll get boring.
Yeah, it definitely will. It's just
eventually, yeah.
It is just one of those things where I think Magic said it even in an interview, like all their losses are to do with mentality or to do with mental, which I could definitely see. I think just sort of small tangent. If anybody hasn't watched it, ESL did release a documentary about the Spirit Donk rise for Katowice, and it is top class.
Oh yeah, I've seen
like a 45. Yeah, it's a 45-minute YouTube video that's on their ESL channel. It is great viewing. I have no hand in it. I just loved the cinema of it. Like, this is what I wanted Counter-Strike to have for a long time. It's like in Dota for their TIs, they used to have true sites where you got like a back end, you got to look at the comms, you listened in on like the coach discussions, vetoes, what people are saying to each other effectively. And you got that kind of insight looking at the Spirit team, and it made me appreciate what Hallie can offer to this squad, because I didn't think of Hallie as like I don't know. He just felt like more like a player manager in my eyes. Like I had him as kind of maybe he'll do some analytics work behind the scenes, but I didn't think of him as like a emotional talisman or a calming, like motivational player or player for this team effectively. But if you listen to some of his timeouts, he says exactly what I want a coach to say when you need him to like level you out. He just had some really strong moments, I think, in the listenings we got. So it's just it's an interesting dynamic. It's interesting to sort of peer into that past the veil. So go watch the video. If you're a Counter-Strike fan, just watch the video. It's a good time.
Yeah, all right. Wait. Hopefully they can bring it back. Honestly, I do like watching Spirit when they're playing good Counter-Strike. Remember that Katowice final was one of the most fun finals ever. Like, despite it being a 3-0 and fairly one-sided, just watching them roll on the big stage like that was crazy. So hopefully we can bring some of that back. That energy was great.
Yeah, we have some great storylines so far. I mean, these past 2 IEM events have been kind of unbelievable. Like, I guess, Chengdu, FaZe finally getting a trophy. But
it's all part of the story. It was a very good, important part of the story, because we still had yet to see Mouse win an event, and they didn't here. They made the final again.
Yeah.
It had its role, but
But Kato and Dallas were sick.
They really were. Let's move on to my underdog pick to round out my picks for this event. And I've picked, firstly, in terms of strategy, it's not a great pick, because I've picked an underdog in a group of death, essentially. But I've taken VirtusPro to somehow make it out of this group. Now, it's going to be a difficult case to make. And I don't need people to agree with me. That's fine. It may not be convincing. Because, my God, is it hard to convince people that this VirtusPro team is as dangerous as I think they still are, after losing 2-1 to Big. It doesn't paint a pretty picture. But let's go. Okay. Dastan was holding this team back. I think a lot of people have missed clearly what this has revealed is like how important and how crucial he was to building the system. It's not just about James. James applies it, and he applies it with robotic efficiency. But it's not just him. It's not just his idea of how to play Counter-Strike. Removing Dastan opens them up to bring in a coach in like Zoma, who, if you've ever watched his Nine Pandas team, which I'm guaranteeing 99% if you never have, do not play VirtusPro Counter-Strike. They really do not. And one of their key players, their most important players, is Dealer Des, an electronic-style entry rotator, huge impact rifler. They've brought in the perfect coach to work with the players they have, especially because this is the first time in a long time you can legitimately say they have a star rifler come in who's aggressive and needs to get that space, who's proven. I mean, they've had Chiron come in before. That was random. That seemed, no one really understood why he came in. Even the players didn't want that move, and it never worked out. They've now got a coach that knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing with electronic.
Mm-hmm.
They have him building his form. If you look at his form, he's been ramping up in anticipation of this. This is the time it unleashes. Zoma comes in, he applies this new approach, it's a mental thing, like this concept of how they're going to approach their game, built around primarily electronic. And they're going to absolutely dominate. They are going to surprise a lot of people. Now, their opening game against Vitality, BO3, rough. Maybe they're not going to squeeze out a win there. But playing against, potentially in the lower bracket, always really good, but maybe not quite good enough G2, they've got a chance of upsetting that. They'll have a rifler ready to go head-to-head with Nico, coming straight off his IGLing break. They have a balance of players across the board who can actually take all the duels they want to against G2's incredibly shallow aim pool and just beat them. Because you saw actually in a lot of games, G2 were getting really effective lurks out of Nexa in terms of the space he was taking up. Then he was winning aim duels. Never again. Not happening. This VirtusPro team will make it out of this group. And once they get to the playoffs, there's going to be a layup coming out of Group A. I'm not sure who it's going to be. It could be the Astralis children on stage. It could be the fraudulent Na'Vi. Hell, with this group, it could be the Portuguese SAW Tier 2 roster. In any case, they're making top 4. And I believe this G2 team this VirtusPro team is going to shock the world.
You couldn't remember who you were lying about. You couldn't remember who you were lying
for a second. I've been all over the shop with my names today. Never been my strength. But VirtusPro, yes, terrifying, monster, beast about to be unleashed. Now, Yumi, bring me back down to reality.
Yeah, I don't know that I believe that there is somebody that will go blow for blow with Nico. But I do agree.
Easily.
Yeah, no, I do believe that there will be somebody for Hooksy and Nexa and
Hunter
and
in the
Hunter.
groups.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
They got better aimers. Mechanically, they're better.
I think the hard part for me is I knew Dastan actually did come in clutch with like some really like pivotal calls. I remember so many VirtusPro timeouts where Dastan is beatboxing away and he is clearly drilling in a strategy that they want to implement, and they'll execute on that plan, and it works. You know, I've seen Dastan do that in big games. I think the problem is that him and James were attached at the hip for so long that, you know, James knows how to play that brand of Counter-Strike pretty thoroughly, and you almost just need a bit of inspiration. Like, that could have happened in terms of like bringing in an analyst that could have served in that way for VirtusPro. But to me, it is sad to see Dastan leave. Like, that is the last part of like the old duo, and it does also put a lot more pressure on these players where Dastan is not attached to you. Like, Zona is not attached to you. You know, he will make a decision if he feels that there is some way in which they can improve the squad. If Norbert isn't cutting it because he went from being a great entry piece for VirtusPro and has been kind of deteriorating as of late, whether that's Fame on some of his extremities plays, you know, there are vulnerable pieces that sort of reveal reveal the weaknesses rather of VirtusPro in some individual moments that Zoma could just decide to cut you for. So I think this will light a fire up the ass of several of the players on VirtusPro. Hell, even Flit, like as a star rifler, sometimes he goes missing. Like I
Yeah, he
need
does.
to see consistency out of somebody on this team because they've all had flashes of being great riflers that can compete and contend at the top end, and then they just have months where they go missing. So, yeah, I think as much as I'm opposed to Dastan leaving fully, I do think this is the right move. So
Mhm.
I don't sort of discredit Zoma coming in, even though he comes from I guess a lesser known pedigree. I think he's a breath of fresh air that maybe VP need.
Yeah, I think Zoma's just earned his way up here at this point. Like, considering how much Nine Pandas really have made the most of what little talent they have. No offense to like this roster, but like Klax and Glowing were never destined for greater things. I disbalance on Yorp. There's a reason
Yeah.
you only hear about him every now and then if they make it through an open quali somewhere. They're not big names and big time future players. So he was building or making things work with Seized at the IGL and realistically Dealer Des just knocking things down. That was their be all end all to their game plan. And I think he's deserved this call up. He's earned it.
Yep.
And I think it is the right approach in terms of the style he was able to make work and the kinds of players he worked with. I think he's the right approach because also did mention the front end. Idis Balance isn't very aggressive. He's a very traditionally passive CIS AWPer. So I don't think it's going to be too much of a shock for Jame in terms of his personal style, like how he likes to approach rounds, take his fights, pick his moments. It's more about making that electronic side work and just changing up the calling system a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not complete delusion that I'm going into this with. I do think there is some aspects of this move that make enough sense for me to believe in it, even a little bit.
I think the only part that's difficult for me is that, you know, you may say he's earned it with the Trident to Nine Pandas squad, but you know, we don't know what coaches do. Like we can't actually see
yes.
that, you know, that we don't know how much of that was seized, for example. We don't know how much of that was, you know, other potential support staff in the Nine Pandas squad. So, you know, there are elements where if a coach is just coming in isolation, I don't know how much help he received in getting that team to that point. So that's where I'm a little hesistant, but
well, the moment Zoma left,
right.
so did Seized. So
yeah,
we'll see.
They got rid of Seized, so that's maybe different.
Pretty much on the exact same time. Like that's not coincidence in my eyes. I don't believe in coincidences in the world of Counter-Strike.
It's like, actually, well, you know, Zoma was maybe doing more of the calling because Nine Pandas were definitely more fearsome online, weren't they? So.
And they immediately brought in Shalfi. I just I think there's some pointers in that sense.
Sure.
But no, that's the VirtusPro spiel. That's the case to make because, as I said, terrible pick in terms of strategy. I just felt like weaving that narrative.
Sure. Okay. I guess
home.
that leads me to my last pick, and you said them at the end of your spiel.
That's just my brain rot. I've been awake too long. No,
well, it's okay. I'm leaning into the brain rot because there were only we've gone for 2 favorites, by the way, and there are only 4 favorites. So someone had to pick this team. We had to talk about them, and I have the opportunity to do so. I have G2. You know, I didn't pick them so much as defaulted them. I have G2.
You love them. Come on.
I don't know what to love. Like, here's my problem. They won an event without Hooksy. He did have his fingerprints all over the G2 win in my eyes. Like, he was credited several times by Nico, by Nexa, or by Hunter, I think. Sorry, not Nexa. That, you know, he was getting on calls with them after their officials. He was telling them what they were doing wrong, what they could be doing, and, you know, how they could improve. You know, he was doing analysis for them while he was in another continent, and, you know, I assume after his sister's wedding, I assume he did attend that and didn't just blow that off for analysis. Otherwise, he'd be at the event.
Oh, that's where the meme was from.
Yeah, no, he went for
because I kept seeing like I thought it was like, you know, just Reddit being perverts or something that like every comment was real MVP hit like
Hooksy's
sister.
sister.
And I was like, was she on stream or something? Like, oh, y'all just that creepy and weird. I didn't realize he was actually at her wedding, and they were being dicks in a different way.
Yeah,
My bad, Reddit. I didn't give you enough credit.
I mean, Oni Pixel as well also said like, shout out Hooksy's sister or something like after the event. So
I wouldn't know, but
yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. So I do think Hooksy is involved. I do think they still credit Hooksy and have a lot of respect for what Hooksy offered up to them in a moment where, you know, he could have just been, I'm not playing with you guys, or I'm not with you guys at the event. You know, you have autonomy. You can do what you want. You know, you understand how I want to call. You understand your system, but you could do other things as well. He could have done that, but he was still involved. The problem I have is that Stewie just revealed like just how, I mean, this was already known before, but just how poor Hooksy plays the role of the you have to be entry because no other role really fits you. Like, this is not something he had to do before joining G2. You know, when he was with Copenhagen Flames, they sent in Roy, and you know, Roy was taking a lot of fights. Hooksy has to go in as and die, but he's not dying in the right ways.
Yeah, I mean, the Copenhagen Flames comparison is difficult, but yeah, I get what you mean. Let's just leave it at that. But
It's just that he could play safer. Like, he wasn't playing forward as much as he is on this G2 team because he has to if he wants his stars to perform effectively. And you know, Stewie did that in a much more effective way. You know, he understood his flight paths and committed to them more wholeheartedly. You know, he had high impact moments at the end of games very frequently for this G2 roster. That's why everybody's giving him praise for his impact. You know, he might have been like 8 and 14 or whatever before he has like a critical 2K in a late round situation, but that's impact. You know, like if you're gonna go missing, you have to show up at a critical moment in the game at some point. And Stewie did that in a way that I don't think Hooksy can. But also, they did so many of these listen-ins on the broadcast where you saw Stewie, who hadn't been playing Counter-Strike for the longest time, talking to Nico, to the whole G2 squad with authority, saying, guys, we just need to listen to each other. We need to listen to each other's comms. We need to like clean things up. You're like, you're not playing Team Counter-Strike. This is like hectic. It's chaotic. And the games reflected that. But he showed experience in a way that I think very few stand-ins could. And you know, because he has the ego to just say to Nico, like, you guys are playing too sporadic or too ridiculous. So it offered a lot. And I think my worry for G2 is that Hooksy coming into that, unless his team brief him on, you know, we need this energy, we need the positive vibes, we need like you to have those types of calls for us. Like, unless he is able to fulfill that, then this G2 team will again be in that problem position of like, hey, we are playing with Nexa and Hooksy that don't really do as much as other players could be doing on this roster. And we are potentially wasting the time of the best player in the world right now in Monacy. Like, G2 as an organization will have to seriously look at that.
They will. I mean, the saving grace thing for you realistically is now.
All right, I was supposed to advocate for them, wasn't I?
You are, but I'll do it for you. Don't worry. So Hooksy now has Mr. He was away, but he was doing anti-strat for them. He was doing demo prep. Okay, now watch your own team's demos. Follow Stewie. Just follow Stewie's POV, and you see when he takes space, when he has to go in through a smoke, when he has to lead the pack, when he does these things on T side. Look how he does it, and do the same thing, because very often times Hooksy's movement is awful, his spacing's just not great, timing's off, all these little things. That even though his kills per round is higher than Stewie's, the team looked more effective under like Stewie's leadership, as in he was literally the front of the pack. But no, your saving grace is also that, well, this is G2. As I said early on in the show, they've got Nico, they've got Monacy, and historically, they've also got Hunter, importantly. As long as they've had Nico and Hunter, they've been a title-threatening team. Almost without fail, with no matter who the IGL was, how bad their AWPA was, how many French people they had to put up with, like, they've always been a potentially title-winning team. And I think that's just enough to pick them. If you have to have a final pick, damn, there's worse combinations of players to have to be stuck with. It's a lot worse. You'd imagine if we had to swap like them and Na'Vi right now in the rankings, there is zero guarantee from anyone on Na'Vi that they can be a title-winning player.
Yeah.
At all. You had one glitch, and that's it. This team has been, for 3.5 years, title ready. They haven't found the right piece to make them a consistent title winner, but they've played at the level of a title-winning team for 3.5 years. I see no reason for that to magically disappear here. They should still be a threat. And maybe, hey, winning a title reinvigorates certain things, inspire Hooksy to, again, take a deeper look at his individual like movement play, focus a bit more on that. There's a number of things that can come out of this. So I think there is definitely positive takes.
Yeah. This is where Hooksy has to basically prove that he is a capable enough Counter-Strike player to adapt his own individual play. Like, to me, this is a potential turning point in his career where if he is able to fix these gaps, fix these problems, and, you know, maybe focus more on calling quickly when he gets entried on a spot, or, you know, not seeming so disenthused when he dies on a duel or pushing for information. Like, if he's able to implement parts of his game that will benefit the team in the long term, like this may be a marker where we go, you know, it took G2 winning an event without Hooksy for Hooksy to realize what he was missing for the team.
Yeah.
So this could be an important chapter on Hooksy's individual journey that could be a massive positive, or it could turn out to be, you know, a weakness and one that G2 have to very seriously consider. But I think Hooksy's role or position is more secure than Nexus currently. So
Definitely.
I guess there is some positive that Hooksy can spin from this, is that, wait a second, everyone's calling for Nexus head. Like, especially, you know, public opinion is shifting, I imagine, quite quickly, and maybe some of its sympathy, some of its villainization with the whole Donna Launders thing, but we won't dive into that. So that's, you know, people are allowed to have opinions. People are allowed to.
They're allowed to, no matter
people.
how terrible those opinions are.
Precisely.
I mean, yeah, that's whatever. And more importantly, no, it's alarming, the difference in their level of play just by changing out JKS for Nexa. I don't care how much you prefer Nexa's like gibber gabber, like how much he talks during rounds, Nico. The numbers are the numbers. The titles are the titles. Like, you're a better team with JKS, but yeah, that is a realistic consideration. I think if you're Hooksy, is like, will I be cut? Well, I don't know, actually. I actually have a chance here, because I probably have one more removal cycle to endure, and then I can maybe apply this work, make this happen.
And I think as well for G2, like, Dallas works for them because they effectively removed 2 maps from their pool. Like, they played a 5-map pool pretty much the whole tournament. So
yeah, that's not something you could probably rely on too much more.
Exactly. Like, if they're going to consistently ban out Mirage and opt for Vertigo instead, like, you have players on that map that, you know, haven't been able to show individual prowess enough to basically take control of games. Like, we very rarely see that on Vertigo. It's maybe why people don't like the map as much. It's like less individual playmaking kind of capabilities, because the angles are weird and there's a lot of head glitches and, you know, all sorts that CT sides can abuse. So yeah, Vertigo is just not a map for them really, but they're going to have to play it probably at this event, or they start banning it and they take Mirage back into their pool, and then, you know, the weaknesses of maybe Nexon, that B anchor, then become more apparent again. So it'll be a weird cycle, I think, for G2 at this event. So that's where all my worry comes in. But they do still have Monacy, they still have Nico, and they have Hunter sometimes. So, you know,
if they can make out the group, yeah, they have Hunter.
For me, that can sometimes be enough. Yeah.
Historically, it's just...
This was not a pick from me, but I haven't lost complete faith in G2. I just think that a lot has to change and a lot has to go right for them at this event if they are going to, you know, come out from a Dallas and not have served that as just like, this tournament had a lot of entertainment value, but it was also a fluke. So
yeah, a lot to consider for them. That's our picks, though. Let's just quickly take a look. Is there anyone we really need to talk about? Because I brushed through some of these teams that we haven't picked. Basically, the rest of Group A, after I picked FaZe, the rest of Group A went untouched. Oh, and Astralis, of course. So the last 2 teams left were the Na'Vi and Saw from Group A.
Yeah.
Na'Vi, I think everyone said their piece. It's like, until they show us otherwise, no one's going to change their tune, I don't think. Unless you have some massive revelation that I'm not aware of.
It's just we can't have two in-game leaders on the same team. I don't know. Like, is Imma calling? Is Alexi B calling? Like, somebody has to do that properly. And you can have secondary callers on teams, but they usually frag
A
a
lot
lot
better than
more.
this, yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, because they didn't just lose to Spirit and Heroic. They didn't pick up a map against Spirit and Heroic with Nikodos.
yeah.
Like, it's pretty bad. So it can't get worse. I guess the biggest point you can put in their favor. They can't really get worse. They want to be a 1 at the last event, and that's it. So maybe they can take a win. Like, I don't know. They probably have a lower bracket game against Saw, so maybe they're guaranteed to go through because they should be favorites going into a Saw matchup, surely. But aside from that, I don't really have much to say about them that I haven't already said on every show I've done since their major win. So that's about it.
Saw also have to
Saw, though.
prove that they can do what they did at the showdown, or they can do what they did at the major, even, for example, on LAN. Like, for them, they have yet to be sort of LAN proven at these big events. They've done it at domestic LANs and maybe smaller events. Some of their players have not on the Saw roster, but they've been to some other events. And for me, I just need to see that they have that kind of staying power, because they didn't show it at ESL Pro League.
No, they really didn't.
But maybe that was because they were busy practicing the new map pool and then realized, like, oh wait, we're still on the old one. I don't know. I don't know.
I wouldn't give them too much credit in that
sense.
I
mean, I'm just trying to play all fields here. I just want this, because they're a fairly young team, this Saw roster, aside from like Muteris and Roman, who are both very old because have been in the Portuguese scene for a long time. Like, the core players, Story, Ujux, Aroslosh, like, those are moldable players that you're hoping don't get tainted by the idea that they can't play on LAN. So
yeah, they need to figure it out. But yeah, Roman, oh god, I do remember watching him at that. Was it the RMR, or was he actually, did they actually make the first stage of the major?
They made the major.
Yeah, because oh wow, they had
the first time a Portuguese squad had done it. So
a horrendous game of Nuke, and him specifically just basically got like 3 frags the entire map. And how is this man a professional player? Was basically the thought running through my head.
They won.
But he's better on LAN, but he's horrendous. He's better online, but he's horrendous on LAN.
Nuke 5 and 6, and they won. So
well, he went 5 and 6. I mean, our point stands. In a game that went more than 7 rounds, it's not good. It's not pretty. But no, that's pretty much it. We need to wrap it up there, I think, because there's not much more to say. We can digress and perhaps coax out some positive thoughts from you on G2 eventually, but I don't think it's worth the effort. Because you managed to say something positive about Saw in half a second, but couldn't muster a single positive thought for G2, who just won Dallas.
I said, this could be a pivotal point in HooXi's career, and we might all look back at this fondly with smiles and say, hey, he actually turned out to be a great player that was able to fix his game and change the way that they play. That could happen. I believe that can happen, like, genuinely, but it is probably the 20% possibility over the 80 that we stand before us that G2 could be screwed. They could be a fake tournament winner, in the sense that the actual roster won't be able to win another tournament.
Yeah, and expect probably a couple changes if that does ever happen. I wonder who they'll bring in this time. I mean, historically, though, they have just not done the right thing when it comes to roster moves. Like, they always make one good cut, one terrible cut, one good addition, one terrible addition, or they cut one player when they needed to cut 3. Like, they've always done this historically, and it's been really hard to truly judge. For example, like, how impactful their IGL is. Could he have won events? Could Alexi be have won events if he had different players? Could the team with Nexa calling have been better if they didn't have 3 perennially broken wrists on the team? Like, it's all these questions with G2. Like, their roster movements are just awkward.
To me, at the moment, what all I want to know more is just, like, what is happening on these teams. Like, Taz as a coach, I don't know what he brings. I can't quantify that. unfortunately. Like, he's a well-spoken, well-liked, well-respected player within the community. Like, he's a legendary player that comes in as a coach, and Neo is the one for FaZe as well. Like, these guys, do they give you that final call? There was I think that was what was cool about the documentary that they released. So we got to see a call from Neo in one of the games where he said, "Guys, we're going to do this," and FaZe executed, and it was a great call. And Neo gets full credit for that, basically. But I want to know what's happening on these backends more, because I think it's so silly that when you think about like sports traditionally, managers or coaches, they'll pull over captains and they will tell them to do things, and it's very specific. Like, they want them to do this very specific thing, but some coaches are just there to motivate you or ground you or do whatever in a game that is so mentally driven. Like, I want to know these things so that I can better understand the decision making as to why these people came in the first place. Like, do you need somebody to just like set your tone? And if that is Stewie doing that for G2, isn't that supposed to be Taz?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, fair.
In my opinion, if that was why they brought Taz in, why hasn't it worked? That's another thing where I need these players or these coaches or whoever is on G2 wholeheartedly to fulfill their roles and execute on them. And this could be a growing point for them. I genuinely think this could be a growing point for them, but that requires a lot of reflection and a lot of work before this event, because they will have to play 6 maps, so they will very quickly realize that they maybe have glaring holes. So
hopefully opponents actually try to punish them a little more. Yeah,
I'm very passionate about this because I want these players to succeed, but at the moment things are not succeeding, and even if they did win an event, it doesn't look likely that they're going to win the next. So
yeah, that's been the case for a little while now. Yeah, they're just a threat to do it, and that's annoying because it's just like, no matter how poorly Hooksy performs, they could just win the event anyway.
Yeah.
And that's one of Kassad's eternal like points he hits on. Is that every time they win an event, it makes it worse, because then Hooksy gets another bit of grace. He gets another 6 months, 8 months, another major cycle, whatever it might be. And much to his frustration, but I don't know. I think if he does manage to figure out his problems, watch the Stewie demos, as I keep putting it. Maybe he's there for the long run.
Oh, what did he say here? What did he call him, bro? And fist bump him after? Okay, yeah. Great job, bro. Hooksy, you're trying too hard. Be you, man.
Hooksy, study the Stewie tapes. She's like, never shut up? You sure?
well, wasn't that the Hooksy announcement video? It's like he told Nico to shut up or something. That was like the content piece that they came in with, and they were like, Hooksy, you're hired. So do that. Do that, I guess.
Yeah, just never shut up yourself. Yeah.
It was all the prophecy.
But okay, that's the Blast Spring Finals. I'm gonna have a whale of a time attending and watching this event. But I also think this could be an absolute nightmare for the teams involved. Like, just the way the groups have been divided up, we could end up with some weird, messy playoff bracket. But hopefully it's as good as some of the best events I've been this year. It's been a pretty good year in terms of banger events for Counter-Strike. The occasional one not being quite as good as always expected, but we've had some real bangers, and that's what matters. Hopefully this is another one to add to the tally. But yeah, watch out for the community posts where I'm going to ask for your opinions. Hopefully you can turn it around, because your form has been a bit off lately. I'm going to be honest. It's not looking good. I'm catching up. Y'all need to step up.
Yeah. Me too.
Let's not talk about your performance recently.
I'm cursed.
You've had a rough
I'm aware.
streak.
I'm cursed.
Yeah, it's ugly, but all right. Thanks for watching. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.